In Western USA in the 2000s, a strange trend in the world of coffee would begin to emerge: bikini baristas. The concept is simple: start a cafe that's only staffed by attractive young women wearing bikinis. It seems many men were willing to pay a premium on their coffee just to get a chance to ogle a scantily clad woman for a few seconds. So many were, in fact, that normal cafes in Seattle would begin to advertise themselves as family-friendly in the 2010s due to the sheer volume of bikini barista coffee shops flooding the area. These espresso gone wild joints tend to be very small and are usually staffed by just 1 or 2 girls. As a result, they usually exist in the form of drive-thrus to keep some sort of separation between the employees and the customers to keep things a little safer. Despite that, the seedy crowd these spots tend to draw in have resulted in many controversies and crimes occurring over the years, with everything from prostitution to kidnapping being reported due to these strange strip coffee shops. The most infamous bikini barista incident, however, happened in January 2025.
Hi, how are you? Good. Have you been here before?
Yeah.
Sir, you need to leave. Unacceptable. Unacceptable.
In Tempe, Arizona, a man will pull up to the drive-thru window of Bikini Beans Coffee with his pants around his ankles, gripping his pickle as he gave a sultry smile to the barista before he realized he was being filmed. As that revelation dawned on him, he immediately drove away, but the damage was already done. The employee would post a video online where it would spread like wildfire. People would track this guy down. His name was Nautica Malone. He was 27 years old, married, and had 2 kids. This is possibly the most embarrassing thing that could happen to somebody, and it was completely self-inflicted too. Nautica unfortunately didn't deal with the incredibly public shaming he was being barraged with all too well. Just 3 days later, he would drive 27 miles to the nearby town of Goodyear, park in an empty parking lot, turn off the car, take out his gun, and pull the trigger. Despite the tragic nature of this event, social media would still continue to extract lulls from this situation. They would deem this a goonicide, and a bunch of young men would hold a candlelight vigil, which they would call a gooneral. Attendees would jokingly refer to Nautica as their goon lord, holding him in some sort of post-ironic position of respect. In fact, anytime Nautica and his demise were being referred to online, the word goon was almost always attached somewhere. We don't actually know if Malone had been a gooner or not, which might be surprising for some of you to hear. After all, he was caught pleasuring himself at a drive-thru. How could he not be a gooner? You see, the death of Nautica Malone marked a sort of critical mass adoption of the word gooning as a sort of lighthearted way to refer to the act of masturbation. YouTubers would make videos talking about gooning crimes, and streamers who have been caught gooning on camera. But what's been lost in the sauce here is what the word gooning actually means. You see, gooning does refer to pleasuring oneself, but it's not quite that simple. I'll put it like this: just simply yanking your chain is kind of like a movie. You have rising action, then a climax, and then it's done. Gooning, on the other hand, is more like a soap opera. There is no climax, and it never ends. You might be thinking that this sounds like edging, and that's true, but gooning is still much more than that. Gooning is a community, a lifestyle, a sexuality, a drug-like high brought on by flooding your brain with dopamine in the most extreme way possible. It's the final destination of man's relationship with the internet and technology, and it's already had some pretty horrible consequences on many people, not just Nautica Malone. Around this time last year, I made a long video detailing the truly vile story of Viper the Rapper, and in it, I said that that was the most degenerate thing I had ever covered. In some ways, that's still true. We're not going to be talking about horrible crimes today, but in another sense, we're moving the bar much, much lower. If you've ever wanted to feel disgusted and scared about the state of the world, for some reason, you're watching the right video. I won't ramble on too much longer, let's just get into it. And oh yeah, if you don't mind, I would really appreciate it if you follow me on Twitter if you use that platform. I'm trying to build a presence there just in case I ever need to get in touch with YouTube support. Just makes me feel better about covering more risque topics like this one. If you're willing to, it's linked in the description, and I would be eternally grateful for the support. Thank you.
Hey Cole, it's your old pal Farrell. Say, I've been thinking about you a lot recently, and I decided to Google your name, and well, I found some concerning stuff. Take a look at that. Isn't that your address?
What?
If you look down there, that's your phone number.
How are they getting this?
These days, it's much easier than you think to just Google somebody and find out all sorts of private information like this. The sites that host this data are run by data brokers. They collect personal information, package it up, and sell it to whoever's willing to pay the right price. And the people who end up forking over the cash for it often end up being scammers and spammers. These guys are making insane money from doing this and is completely legal in America. Despite that, the law does technically require these data brokers to remove your info if you request them to, but these companies make it as hard for you to do that as possible. They'll do whatever they have to discourage you from exercising your legal rights. That's why I use Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura not only will navigate the tricky process of submitting opt-out requests for you, but they'll also find the data brokers that have your data. Just give them a few weeks and you'll stop seeing your info popping up on these sketchy sites when you Google yourself. Aura will also continuously monitor the dark web just in case your info ends up there as well, and if it does, they'll send you an alert. On top of all that, they'll also let you know if someone tries to use your compromised information to access credit or bank accounts, and they give you up to $5 million in identity theft insurance should the worst happen. If all that wasn't enough, they also include a world-class VPN service in their subscription, which allows you to browse and shop safely from any location you choose. You can go to aura.com/feral to try 14 days for free. That's enough time for Aura to figure out which data brokers are selling your information and start submitting opt-out requests on your behalf. Thank you to Aura for sponsoring this video. In early 2019, a new community focused on adult content would be founded on Reddit. It was called Gooned, and it featured a bit of a different take on not safe for work media. For all of history before the creation of this Reddit community, X-rated material was mostly focused on creating some sort of fantasy for the viewer to insert themselves into. From ancient Greek pottery art to modern day OnlyFans content, the whole idea behind viewing this sort of thing is to imagine yourself as taking part in the activity that's being depicted in front of you. Gooned managed to break this incredibly long-standing pattern in a strange way. Instead of imagining yourself being intimate with the people on screen, the content on this subreddit would instead focus around the act of viewing pornography itself. Users would edit short clips of adult content with captions that give the viewer instructions on what to do as they're watching the video. They would also sometimes ask users to worship the actress being shown on screen like a god, and most commonly of all, they almost always talk about melting your brain and reaching something called a goon state. You might remember a few minutes ago when I said the difference between gooning and normal self-pleasure is the fact that gooning doesn't stop. Supposedly, if you do this for enough time, you'll reach something called a goon state, a euphoric, mindless, dopamine rush-aided flow state. This is apparently so powerful it feels like being on drugs, and it's the ultimate goal of gooning for hours on end. Speaking of illicit substances, they seem to be a common topic in the gooning community, with the sex on drugs subreddit being taken over by gooners looking for mind-altering elixirs to enhance their viewing experiences. The most common suggestions here seem to be cannabis, alkyl nitrates, Viagra, and crystal meth. Redditors on Gooned will write about how these drugs help break their brain and make them stupid, in turn helping them achieve the very sought-after goon state. In mid-2025, a journalist known as Daniel Collitz wrote a fantastic long-form article about gooning culture for Harper's Magazine, which is really the only serious literature on this subject you can find right now. He didn't just investigate these communities, he interviewed a few prominent gooners and ran a survey to quantify some of the finer details surrounding the act of gooning. One of the facts he learned from this survey was how long the average gooner gooned for, which was about 2 to 3 hours daily. Although a few times a month, your everyday normal gooner will typically have a marathon session that could potentially last up to 12 hours. Those marathon sessions are typically done in search of that so-called goon state. When people view adult media in a conventional way, they're always aware that they're replacing the real thing with an artificial substitute. It's by design not intended to replace the real thing or be your end goal of human intimacy. For gooners though, watching not safe for work media is indeed their end goal. They don't want the real thing. This has some major consequences that greatly shape both the sort of content gooners watch and gooners themselves. For one thing, without empathizing in some way with the performers on screen, the gooner is instead reduced to always being an outside observer. This without fail always seems to invite humiliation as a component in gooning content. The captions very often mock the viewer, calling them a beta male or a sissy, asking them to burn all their money on OnlyFans subscriptions and telling them they're not allowed to stop gooning. The second major implication of becoming a gooner and having your end goal of human intimacy be watching visual content is they just sort of tap out of the dating pool and become voluntarily celibate. The gooner doesn't seek a partner, they only seek adult media. As such, many Gooners don't even identify as homo or heterosexual. They instead describe themselves as pornosexual, meaning they're only attracted to not safe for work content and not real people in any way. Now, I'm sure I don't have to convince you that this is impossible in that to be attracted to smut, you by design have to also be attracted to real people, but in any event, being quote-unquote pornosexual is very common in the gooning community. Without the possibility of ever having a partner, Gooners instead find companionship in the company of other Gooners. While viewing adult media in a conventional manner is almost always a solitary and kind of shameful activity, gooning is instead a communal one, and Gooners will openly discuss their activities with one another, which has led to the gooning community becoming one of the largest and most expansive not safe for work communities on the internet. Gooning has slowly taken over the culture of online pornography over the years, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's still 2019, and we have a lot to get through. The idea of fetishizing the act of watching adult media was a novel one. It was something that had never been explored before, and Gooners would be swift to expand on this concept and introduce other novel trends into their newly Christian community of smut, the first of which being Goon Caves. Our Goon Caves was founded only 2 months after Our Gooned, and it once again broke a fourth wall. Instead of sharing not safe for work media directly, users here would instead share photos and videos of themselves viewing not safe for work content. You might have heard of a subreddit called Our Battle Stations where people share photos of their slick high-end gaming computer setups. Our Goon Caves is essentially the seedy video store backroom version of this. Users would share with others the great lengths they would go to just to watch adult content, with a heavy emphasis on having multiple screens playing many different films at the same time. Sometimes users would post time-lapses showing themselves viewing adult videos for hours on end. Other users would joke about canceling plans so they can stay home and watch not safe for work movies. This post is probably the most well-known thing to come from this subreddit. It shows us the OP's emergency gooning kit he created, so he can drop everything in Goon no matter where he is. It's complete with a binder of photos, a flashlight, and 2 external drives containing 6 terabytes of adult content. This user shows us a monitor overlay he created so he can play Battlefield while simultaneously watching 16 adult movies at the same time.
That's badass. How can you even aim? Definitely can't when they walk right in front and have been kicked for being AFK when I'm really into the video.
One thing you'll notice on Our Goon Caves is a slightly different focus it has compared to Our Gooned. Many posts here seem to be showing off the Gooner much more than the adult media he's enjoying. Commenters seem to compliment the physical features of the Gooner more than the performers in the films they're watching. This brings a sort of homoerotic angle into the mix, and believe me, it's way more prevalent than you might think. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, it's still 2019 and I guess that's starting now, eh? The social isolation caused by the pandemic seemed to supercharge the gooning community, growing its ranks by hundreds of thousands. While people were posting eerie pictures of normally busy streets that had suddenly become deserted and free of people, Gooners were also posting photos showing where some of those people had gone and what they were now doing. Without being able to see others in person for an extended period of time, it makes sense how some might turn to this strange community for some perverse idea of comfort. But as the pandemic wound down, gooning didn't. It only grew larger. And with social distancing being done away with and people now able to see each other again, the communal aspect of gooning would take on a new meaning. In 2022, a new gooning-related subreddit would hit the internet. This one was called Goon Buds, and it's exactly what you think it is. Gooners would post on the sub seeking other Gooners to goon with, typically ranging from activities such as DMing one another on Reddit, to having a video call, to actually meeting up in person. While you might expect the virtual options to be the most common, if you actually look in a Goon Buds meetup thread, you'll mostly find men seeking other men to hang out with in person. In Daniel Collitz's survey, 70% of respondents said that they participate in some form of group activities with other male Gooners. You might be noticing the gay undertones to this whole thing, but believe it or not, most people who participate in these so-called group activities with other men identify as straight. One Gooner that Collitz interviewed claimed to find gay adult media quote-unquote disgusting, while at the same time seemingly only ever involving other men in his own intimate affairs. The whole Goombud thing is a very interesting psychological aspect of gooning culture. If you try to analyze the different patterns in goon captions, you'll notice that the only other human that ever gets alluded to in the viewer's fantasy is the Goombud. Sometimes the caption will portray this goonbud visually as the female performer in the video clip, even though they by all means are referring to another man. In 2024, the goonbud subreddit would be banned for being unmoderated, along with countless other not safe for work subreddits. In fact, a lot of gooning subreddits have been banned over the years, not just for being unmoderated. Around the same time, our goon caves would also be deleted, with Reddit stating that the sub had violated the site's rules surrounding non-consensual intimate media, meaning something pretty horrible must have been posted there. The website 404 News would manage to get a hold of one of the Goon Cave moderators to ask for some clarification about what happened, but the mod said that they didn't know specifically what the catalyst for the ban was. Just that, quote,
"Unfortunately, there are a minority who have to ruin it for everyone by posting something questionable or illegal."
An unspecified point in time, mostly because this flew under the radar and isn't really documented anywhere, the Goon caption subreddit would also be banned. This was the factory for all those Goon captions we've been talking about. The reason stated here was that the community had violated Reddit's rules against suggestive content involving minors. We'll return to that theme in a little bit. As 2024 rolled into 2025, more gooning subreddits would continue to be banned, with the only real long-standing survivor being the main Gooned subreddit, which currently has more than 2 million followers. You might assume that all these communities being banned and not being replaced with any sort of substitute might mean that Gooners were rejecting some of the more questionable aspects of their community, right? No, they just moved off of Reddit. And guess where they ended up? The internet's favorite private place for degeneracy. Discord. In the last few years, gooning-related Discord servers have exploded in popularity, with some of them garnering north of 60,000 members. The communal aspect of gooning may have started on Reddit, but it was supercharged by the collaborative nature of Discord. Once again, fresh new takes on the idea of gooning would be introduced in these servers, like goon battles. The idea is simple: you pick an opponent and you start DMing each other not safe for work material. The goal is to send the other man media that matches his taste, and the first dude to finish loses. If you lose, you'll have to submit to the winning fella and admit in the humiliation channel that you are in fact an inferior gooner. Believe it or not, it gets even worse. We haven't talked about the stream rooms yet. If you've ever used Omegle, previously known as chat roulette, before it bit the dust, you probably had the same experience that everyone else has. You hit reset expecting someone new to pop up on your screen, but instead, you get a view of a man yanking his chain. I always wonder what was going through the heads of the men doing that stuff. My theory was that they were waiting to be matched with another man grabbing the hot dog, and together they would just kind of poach their eggs with one another. Well, that's basically what's happening in these stream rooms on these Gooner Discord servers. Someone will share their screens and play not safe for work content, while everybody else just kind of points their camera downwards to show how much they're enjoying it. Daniel Collins mentions in his article that one problem these servers typically have to contend with are Gooners who describe themselves as no limits, which is exactly what it sounds like. This is a subset of Gooners who have no limits on the content they consume, no matter how depraved, immoral, or evil it is. If you're combining illicit substances with the mindless, brain-damaged nature of an activity like gooning that both encourages and rewards depravity, it makes sense how it might lead to some truly awful places. I've done a lot of reading in the last little while about gooning culture, and one thing I've never seen properly investigated is the origins of this. How did something as absurd and perverse as gooning even come to be in the first place? Everybody seems to give the same half-hearted explanation about easy access to smut with the internet, but that's a very small part of a much larger story that always seems to be looked over. And understanding the origins of gooning will help you understand the mind of the average gooner, and it's a lot more depressing than you might expect. Whenever there's an onset of any new kind of media, adult content always seems to be a key part of it. Whether it's photos, movies, or cable TV, not safe for work material always seems to sit alongside the more traditional and family-friendly versions of these new blossoming art forms. The same can be said for online video streaming. As soon as YouTube began to show the slightest hint of success, not safe for work YouTube clones would start popping up like The Hub or RedTube. These sites did the exact same thing as YouTube. They presented the user with a homepage filled with short clips to choose from. This was a massive change from how people used to view adult material. You didn't have to go into a physical store anymore to buy a DVD or a VHS. You could just turn your computer on and enter a website into the address bar. Access to adult media would only get easier as time went on. Soon, everybody had smartphones in their pockets, and you could browse adult videos whenever and wherever you wanted. In about 50 years, we went from having to go into a seedy XXX movie theater in a bad part of town like Pee Wee Herman to being able to view adult media by merely taking your phone out of your pocket. Do you think it's possible this might not be the best thing for our mental health? Some Redditors certainly thought so. In 2011, the NoFap subreddit would be created, starting the internet's first backlash against adult media. While historically, self-pleasure and not safe for work content has always been frowned upon for moral or religious reasons, NoFap instead supposedly based their beliefs on science. The NoFap movement alleges that while self-pleasure in moderation can be a healthy activity, the overuse of adult media can result in an addiction that can alter your mind. Porn addiction can supposedly lead to side effects like erectile dysfunction, decreased libido, fatigue, and even brain fog. These symptoms are due to the fact that not safe for work content supposedly hijacks your brain's reward system and overloads it with dopamine, and going NoFap is supposed to reset this system. That's based on pseudoscience and has never actually been proven anywhere, but it didn't matter. The ideas of NoFap struck a chord with the generation that had grown up watching adult media from way too young an age, and the concept of it possibly being bad led many people to try abstaining from it for a while, which I don't really think is a bad thing even if the reasoning is based on faulty data. The NoFap challenge was simple. Stop all viewing of not safe for work content and self-pleasuring for 90 days. This is supposedly enough time for your brain to rewire itself. Through this reset period, you may apparently gain superpowers. Women will finally notice you, you'll act more confident and manly, you'll stop being a beta male and finally grow into the alpha you were always destined to be. I think this was the allure for a lot of people who joined NoFap, the idea that this one simple thing could be the root of all your problems. I'm sure there were quite a few people who joined this movement that had an actual addiction to pornography, but judging on the posts you see on this subreddit, most people are just in search of the superpowers. Turns out that abstaining from all sexual activity for 90 days is actually a bit of a challenge, and most people who attempt it end up quote-unquote relapsing and then failing, having to reset the timer to 0. That's the methodology here. If you mess up and visit the hub even one time, you have failed and will need to start over from scratch. Marginal improvements are not recognized in this space. Some NoFappers will spend years trying to reach the 90 days it takes to supposedly reset their brain and turn them into an alpha wolf. The psychological implications of this cycle of failure and shame are immense, and in my opinion, it is what directly led to the creation of the gooning community. One thing I haven't mentioned to you yet is the overarching theme of addiction among gooning content. Many gooning captions make mention of surrendering to your addiction, and the word relapse is very common. Where else might you have heard that word before? Some formerly NoFap subreddits have been taken over by gooners, replacing the posts from users trying to quit porn with posts requesting the viewer to give into their addiction and relapse. I believe there's a direct pipeline leading from NoFap into gooning, and it looks something like this. We're gonna create a character. Let's name him Joshua. Joshua's a regular guy. He's 20 years old and enjoys watching adult videos on a semi-regular basis. Joshua also has a couple problems. He's a little awkward when talking to girls and has never had a real relationship. These are very common situations for a 20-year-old man, but in Joshua's mind, he considers them to be personal problems nonetheless. Joshua discovers NoFap. He learns that maybe his issue is that he's just watching too much adult content. Maybe his lack of success with the ladies is because his brain's reward system has been hijacked and it's ruining his confidence. Joshua tries out NoFap. He makes it for 20 days, but then he sees a scantily clad OnlyFans model advertising her content on his Instagram feed, and it makes him relapse. Joshua notices that when he visited the hub after not engaging in any sexual activity for 3 weeks, the experience was much more intense this time. It felt similar to when he first saw an adult video when he was 12. Joshua gets back on his NoFap grind. This time he makes it 46 days, but somebody posted a link to a porn video in a Reddit comment and he accidentally clicked on it. Joshua is suddenly greeted by a screen full of naked women. It's a shocking sight to behold, and the rush it gives him almost feels like having a cigarette for the first time. Joshua gives in and relapses and has to set his NoFap counter back to 0. This cycle repeats 6 more times. It's almost a year later now, and Joshua's relationship to not safe for work material is completely different now. Anytime he views it, it's always a very intense experience after long periods of abstaining, and the shame it brings him is always immense. But in a strange way, he almost looks forward to relapsing. Joshua might not have been addicted to porn before, but he has certainly developed a toxic relationship to it now. The mixture of shame and pleasure is confusing. He started this journey to become better with women in real life, but nowadays he's mostly just trying his hardest to not engage in any sexual activity at all, until something catches his eye on the internet and he decides it's time to relapse again. And when that happens, he goes all out. After all, if you're setting the counter to 0, why not get your fill of adult media before trying to give it up again? This time when relapsing, Joshua comes across a subreddit called r/gooned. There, he sees videos with captions mocking him for relapsing, and he immediately finds it appealing. It's like the content here was specifically designed with him in mind. It tells him to not climax and to just keep going, so he does. And he never really stops. Joshua has become a fully fledged gooner. Gooning culture seems very random and chaotic on the surface, but when you match it up with the nofap community, suddenly everything makes sense. Gooners have just fetishized that mixture of intense pleasure and shame one gets from failing a nofap streak and turned it into a lifestyle. I'm sure many Gooners are still actively into nofap and they just experience periods of prolonged relapses until they head back to their nofap communities with their tail between their legs. If you look at Google Trends, you'll notice that gooning started at the peak of nofap's popularity. Then the pandemic happened, which isolated everyone and removed the whole real woman element from the equation for the vast majority of these men. And suddenly, you have a whole internet subculture specifically designed around both being ashamed of and simultaneously worshipping pornography. If you don't believe me, go visit r/nofap yourself and just read a few posts. It feels like the yin to a gooner's yang. That's not a very nice sentence, is it? To test out this theory, I decided to visit a subreddit called Gooner Recovery. It's exactly what it sounds like, a place for people trying to recover from their gooning addictions. I made a post asking if anyone there had tried and failed nofap before turning to gooning, and to my surprise, every user who responded said that they had. I don't think every single person who's into gooning started off by trying nofap, but I do think it's what led to the creation of gooning in the first place, and I think it's directly responsible for creating a large portion of the gooners that exist today in the world. Now, I'm not trying to demonize nofap. I think it's probably a good idea for anybody who regularly consumes not safe for work content to try taking a break from it. But it's not going to give you superpowers and fix every problem in your life, and I think the whole idea of relapsing and resetting your progress to 0 every time is not the best way to go about it. Especially if you're actually addicted, you should be focusing on your cumulative progress over time and not the odd moments you happen to slip up. We're not talking about hard drugs here. Quitting adult media is more like quitting junk food. Just because you ate a bowl of ice cream doesn't mean you're going to suddenly regain all the weight you lost in the last couple of months. Unless the psychological weight of that slip up is too much and you just give up and start gorging yourself regularly. Okay, we've gone over the gooning past, we've gone over the gooning present. Just like Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, the worst thing we're going to talk about today lays ahead in the gooning future. This internet subculture is already a very bleak thing, but there are forces out there trying to isolate people even further, and they are much stronger and more prevalent than you might think. I usually tend to be pretty down to earth and optimistic about most things. I always try to give a more reasonable and nuanced take, but this one's not looking so good, fellas. Remember those gooning servers on Discord? Some of them have gotten so large, they've been able to take on sponsorships from companies, which usually seem to fall into one of two categories. The first is manufacturers of flashlights, the second are AI companies. These startups are offering not safe for work chatbots that apparently let you generate an intimate companion that will audibly speak to you, and you can also generate pictures and videos of them without any limits. The AI company sponsoring the Goonverse server is called Candy.ai. When visiting the site, you're greeted with many different AI-generated women to choose from, but you can also create your own character if you want. Each of these clankers has its own unique backstory, and I guess the idea here is that you flirt and roleplay with these chatbots. This might potentially seem like a harmless activity on the surface, but if you watch my video about that AI cult I joined, people fall in love and form what they perceive to be real relationships with just regular old ChatGPT, which isn't specifically designed to act as a personal companion like Candy AI is. Now, one small company offering essentially a human-free digital adult media experience may not seem like a big deal, but what is about to become a huge problem is the fact that a lot of these so-called frontier AI companies are also pivoting to be able to offer their users straight-up porn. I'm not kidding. Meta was recently caught torrenting 2,400 adult movies for AI training purposes. What do you think they might be training their AI to do with adult movies? ChatGPT, the biggest company spearheading the entire AI movement, is also planning to relax their rules and allow the generation of erotica this year. It's not just small companies. The biggest voices in this industry are about to look to the gooning community for a new market to explore. Gooning as an activity is basically the rejection of real companionship. It's admitting defeat and turning to the internet and other lonely men to replace the warmth you might get from having a real partner. It's deranged, but at the very least, Gooners are still connecting with other humans in some way, even if it's twisted. With the onset of AI into this community, that might not be the case for much longer. AI startups would rather Gooners goon with chatbots than with other humans. Imagine a future where men are alone in a room sitting by their computers for hours a day, gooning to AI-generated material and talking to clankers. A future where men give up on getting a real partner without even ever really trying. In Daniel Collitz's article, one of the data points he uncovered with his survey was that the median age for so-called pornosexuals in the Gooner community was quite a bit younger than people who still pursued partners in real life. Gooning has in effect turned a lot of these young men into incels, and mega corporations like Meta and OpenAI are eager to use their deep pockets and immense power to make this problem even more dire. If you want to learn more about gooning, go check out Daniel Collitz's article. I'll link it down below. He goes over some interesting things that I didn't. If you happen to be a Gooner and you want to make a change in your life, go check out the Gooner Recovering subreddit. I'll also link that down below. And last but not least, thank you very much for watching. I know this was a bit of a depressing video, but keep in mind that despite a bit of darkness here and there, the world is still full of beauty and mostly wonderful people, and it's always worth fighting for. Laying down and rotting only makes things worse. Every person with a pulse is capable of having a positive effect on their own life and the lives of others, so why not use that power you have inside you right now to make the world just a little bit better? Okay, I think that's enough. Have a good night, guys.